From two-cycle oil to ATF and even OEM branded diesel fuel additives. There are tons of products that claim to increase either the cetane or lubricity of your diesel fuel. Hi, I'm Lake, the motor oil geek, and working with Andrew, the repair geek, we put 7 more of these additives to the test to get you the data. But along the way, we've learned something that's changed my mind about diesel fuel additives. In a previous video, we showed how regular diesel fuels don't contain detergent additives. And those same regular diesel fuels tend to be towards the minimum in terms of the lubricity requirement, which is a concern for modern engines with high pressure fuel pumps. Based on that, it only makes sense to add a detergent additive and lubricity enhancer to the fuel. And if it happens to boost the cetane at the same time, well, that's just a bonus. However, since making that video, we've learned something really important about modern high-pressure common rail diesel engines. The cleanliness of the fuel is critical. Very small particles, we're talking 2 to 6 microns in size, can damage fuel injectors. So there's more than just lubricity to consider when it comes to your fuel. Based on that, let's take a look at some lab results from 7 different popular diesel fuel additives. First, we're going to take a look at what's in these additives. Then, we're going to run some ASTM tests for both lubricity and cetane to see how these additives either improve or hurt those results. And we've added one new point of comparison: premium diesel fuel. You're not going to want to miss the results for that. To test fuel additives, the first thing you need is fuel. We talk about oxidation on these results. What we're looking at are the basically oxygen atoms within the molecule. Because when you have, say, an ester is a hydrocarbon type chemical that actually contains an oxygen. And that oxygen atom gives that molecule polarity. So it will want to kind of go and stick on a surface like a magnet. So it can provide some lubricity via that attraction to the metallic surface because of that magnetism, if you will. So the higher the oxidation level, the more oxygen atoms are within the molecule, so the greater chance of that chemistry providing some lubricity. I hope that makes sense. So when we look at these results, let's kind of glance through and look at both viscosity and oxidation first. And we see with the Lucas, it's right at 35 absorbance units on oxidation. So that definitely says there's some ester in that chemistry. The Howe's is at 19.8, call it 20. It also has some level of ester, not as much as the Lucas apparently. When we get to the Marvel Mystery Oil, now we see we're below 10. So it doesn't have that same higher ester kind of concentration that provides lubricity. Also, we see the Motorcraft, now it's back up to 23. So the Motorcraft product is bringing some lubricity via the ester concentration that we can see via the oxidation values here. Let's compare those results to the Amsoil, the two-stroke oil, and the ATF. And we can see that the Amsoil has the highest level of oxidation. So Amsoil typically leans on esters in a lot of their formulations, even engine oils. So we can see that there's a high ester concentration here that's going to bring in that lubricity. We see the two-cycle oil has a lower level of oxidation, so not as much ester potentially here, but more in line with what we saw with, say, the Howe's product. And the ATF has a low level of oxidation because ATFs aren't going to contain a high level of ester for lubricity. that oxidation value is probably coming from dispersant additives in the ATF, because ATFs are kind of used to be cleaning, because they're high detergent. Typically, ATFs really aren't technically high detergent. There's not going to have a ton of calcium or magnesium, those kind of true detergent additives. They do tend to be high dispersant chemicals. They can clean, but different than what we would consider from a technical standpoint detergents, but they can provide some cleanliness and dispersion. So really very different chemistries here between, we'll call it the handful of products that are really meant to be used in a diesel fuel, right? And that's the Lucas, the Howes, the Amsoil, and the Motorcraft product. Then you've got the Marvel Mystery Oil, which is a one bottle, works in all kinds of different things type product. And then we have two-cycle oil and ATF. They're being used kind of off-label as a, we'll call it budget-friendly fuel additive, is how those are really being utilized, right? And why people use them. So we can see that there's a big difference in the amount of ester, the oxidation values across these products. We also can see a pretty big difference in viscosity. The ATF and two-cycle oils are quite a bit thicker than, say, the Amsoil product, because the Amsoil is a fuel additive designed for that purpose, whereas the two-cycle oil and the ATF, we're using those off-label. Those are much higher viscosity products. Now we compare those results to the Lucas, the Marvel Mystery Oil, the Howes, and the Motorcraft product. Again, we can see some difference here. The Lucas is the highest viscosity of the bunch, but still a little bit lower in viscosity compared to the two-cycle oil and the ATF. And all these different viscosities really point to one thing. There's a bunch of different ways of trying to go about providing enhanced lubricity. Some are doing it through viscosity, some are doing it through more oxidation, chemical methods. And then of course there are some of these products that actually do contain ash, some kind of metallic component. And that's the really key thing to keep in mind here. If you look at the Howes, the Lucas, and the Motorcraft, there's no phosphorus, there's no calcium, no zinc, no metal-containing additives. But there is some phosphorus in the Marvel Mystery Oil. So anytime you have something that can contain ash, that's something to keep in mind when you have a DPF, because that diesel particulate filter in the exhaust, the higher the ash content that's in the fuel and in the oil that's in the engine, the more often that DPF is likely to regenerate. And when you have DPF regens, that's going to typically decrease fuel economy. And we've also seen that more frequent DPF regens actually lead to a higher level of fuel dilution. And fuel dilution is kind of the number one enemy of your oil, so you don't want to be putting something into your fuel that's going to actually cause more frequent DPF regens. That's just not going to be a good thing for you and your engine in the long run. So when we see these first set of results, most of the products don't have any kind of ash containing additives in them. When we look at the Amsoil, the two-cycle oil, and the ATF, well, the two-cycle oil and the Amsoil, there's no ash. But of course, the ATF, not being intended to ever be used as a fuel additive, guess what? It's going to contain calcium, it's going to contain phosphorus, it's got some boron in there. So there's ash in the ATF. So like we just said, anytime there's ash in the fuel, that's going to put more load on the DPF, which could lead to more frequent DPF regens. So when you're choosing a diesel fuel additive, you definitely want to go the ashless route. That's the safest bet, and you can see that from the OEM product in the list, right? It's going to kind of give you a good point of reference of what does the OEM say works good for their engine? Oh yeah, the one without the ash. So a good point of reference there. But there's one last thing about these lab results that we need to cover, and that's the particle count. Like we mentioned earlier, one of the things we've learned in the last year is that diesel fuel cleanliness is really critical to fuel injector life. When you're getting particles in that 2 to 6 micron range in the fuel, it can damage the injectors. So what we see with these particle counts is we can see that first number is the number of particles greater than 4 microns. Then that next number is the number of particles greater than 6 microns. Then that last number is the number of particles greater than 14 microns. So this gives you an idea of the cleanliness. So when you take an additive and you put that additive into your fuel, is that additive going to make your fuel dirtier? Is it going to be adding 4 to 6 micron size particles to the fuel that could actually damage the injectors, right? Work against the whole premise of putting an additive in the fuel in the first place. And when we look at these results, it is super clear. Take the Amsoil versus the 2-cycle oil versus the ATF, for example. That particle count of 15, 13, 9 for the Amsoil, that is really, really clean. Of course, the ATF, because it's for a hydraulic system, we've covered that in a previous video about how cleanliness is super important anytime there's a hydraulic system involved. And by the way, your engine is a hydraulic system. 13, 11, 8. So we've got 2 fluids here that are super, super clean, but one of them is not super clean. The 2018-12 2-cycle oil is considerably dirtier in comparison to these two. Just for reference, every time one of these numbers increases by 1, it means the total number of particles doubled. Therefore, from the Amsoil to the 2-cycle oil, it's 5 times dirtier. That's a big number. And looking at the Lucas, the Howe's, the Marvel Mystery Oil, and the Motorcraft, we at least see those numbers are less. They're higher than the Amsoil, but at least they're quite a bit lower than the 2-cycle oil. So this is just something to keep in mind, that when you put something in the fuel and you're trying to get it to increase cleanliness or detergency or cetane, all those good things, just got to make sure that it's not putting in particles that could be damaging your injector or overloading your fuel filter. Because the fuel filter is trying to do its job to protect that, but the dirtier the fuel is, the harder it is, and no filter is 100% effective 100% of the time. So just keep that in mind. Now, before you think that adding more additive is the answer to making things better, stop. Overdosing fuel additives can actually increase fuel dilution. Most of what's in a bottle of additive isn't active ingredient, it's actually carrier fluid. And that carrier fluid typically has a higher boiling point than the fuel itself. High levels of additive in your fuel could lead to high fuel dilution, which is going to lead to shorter oil life. So more isn't always better. If the additive can't get the job done at the regular treat rate, don't try to overdose it. So that's the lab results telling us what's in those products. Now let's see those ASTM test results that show us what those products actually do. For our reference, we just went to a Murphy's station in San Antonio, Texas, and just bought some regular number 2 diesel fuel. And then we had the lab blend in each of these additives at the prescribed treat rate on those products in order to then run lubricity and cetane on both of them. And that base number 2 diesel came in with the cetane right at 46, which the Texas minimum is 45. So it's right there just above the minimum. In the lubricity test, the ASTM D613 produced a wear scar of 530 microns. It's actually right there, just above the limit of 520. Now, one thing to keep in mind, if we ran all of these tests multiple times, I guarantee you the average of that Murphy's is going to average out at 520, which is the dead minimum for lubricity, which is what we said earlier, that number 2 diesel fuel tends to be right at the minimum for cetane and lubricity, but we know that many OEMs, like European OEMs, some fuel pump injector manufacturers like Bosch, they would rather see, a wear scar in, say, maybe 460 or maybe down as low as 400. That's what they would prefer to see. Okay, and of course we know that engines like a little bit higher cetane if that's possible. So let's see what these additives could do to that base fuel since it's right there at the minimums. First thing we added was the 2-cycle oil, which everyone wanted us to do from the previous video we did about diesel fuel additives. What about 2-cycle oil? Well, the answer is it definitely improved the wear scar from 530 down to 400. So big positive on improvement in the wear scar, and it actually increased the cetane slightly from 46 to 47.7. So a real small bump. Some of that's probably just noise in the test, but there was an improvement using the 2-cycle oil. The next one was the Amsoil 4-in-1. So that's detergency, lubricity, cetane, the whole 9, right? And what we see with that one is the cetane definitely increased. So it went from 46.1 to 48.9, round up, call it 49. So basically 46 to 49, roughly, with the Amsoil 4-in-1. And of course, the wear scar dropped to 400 from 530. So the Amsoil delivered the same wear scar as essentially the 2-cycle oil, but delivered a larger increase in terms of cetane. Next one up is the Ford Motorcraft product. Again, this is a really good one because this is kind of a reference point of this is a product that's been tested by that OEM in their engines, and they are saying this product is good for increasing the performance of the engine and helping protect things like the CP4 pump. So we know this product's a good baseline to say an OEM has tested this and validated its performance in the field and knows that it's good. And we see with the Motorcraft product that the cetane goes up by 5.8. So we went from 46.1 to 51.9, almost 52. So we got a nice big bump in cetane with that product. And the wear scar goes from 530 down to 440. So we see these results are kind of in between what, say, Bosch is calling for in terms of a minimum of 400 and what some of the European OEMs are calling for as a minimum of 460 on this test. It's landing right there at 440 in that window. And like we said, there's going to be some noise. So I'd say anything that's a difference between 10, plus minus 10 on these results is going to be within the range, the noise of this type of test. So don't take that one number and take it to the bank and say, well, that's what they said. Well, that's just one test, right? It could vary a little bit. Next one up is the Marvel Mystery Oil, right? The product that says you can use it in both gasoline or diesel. And the problem with that statement, in my opinion, is that octane and cetane are opposite of each other. So if it's going to increase octane, it's going to decrease cetane. If it increases cetane, it's going to decrease octane. You can't have both. That things that are branched typically increase octane. Things that are straight chain tend to decrease octane but increase cetane. It's just the way that laws of physics and chemistry work. And so we see is that the Marvel Mystery Oil also generated that smaller wear scar of at 400 microns, which is a positive, but we lost cetane. We went down by 1.2. And that just shows that, again, what we just talked about. Next one up is the ATF. Similar story here with the ATF. We also lost cetane, but improved the wear scar. 420 microns, so it's pretty similar to what the Motorcraft product was. Both an improvement from the baseline, but our cetane went the wrong direction slightly. Next up is the Howe's lubricator. This product, the name says it all. It's about lubricity. It definitely delivered lubricity, bringing that wear scar from 530 down to 350, but it really didn't do much to help with cetane. A 0.2 increase, again, that's just the noise in the test. So the Howe's lubricator definitely increased lubricity, but it really didn't do anything in terms of cetane. The last additive in this batch is the Lucas Cetane Booster Plus, kind of all-in-one type product. And we see is that it definitely delivered a ton of lubricity. We kind of saw that one coming, right? It had a higher viscosity. It had that high oxidation value. So we're like, this product kind of seems like it's going to really deliver the goods when it comes to lubricity, and it did. Like the Howe's, it dropped that wear scar down from 530 to 350, but unlike the Howe's product, the Lucas was able to deliver on that cetane boost, going from 46.1 to 48.9, 2.8, we'll call it almost 3-point improvement in cetane. That's a good increase right there. But we compare all of these additives and their relative performance to that baseline Murphy's, they all get blown away by the Exxon Premium Diesel, which is also available at mobile stations. That Premium Diesel has detergency, it has lubricity, it has a cetane improvement. From the pump, that Premium Diesel was over 12 points higher than the Murphy's. So literally right down the street, you go from 46.1 to 58.6 on your cetane. That's a huge cetane improvement. That's more than any one additive could deliver by itself. The wear scar went from 530 down to 400. So this product, this fuel, not an additive, just the fuel, meets cleanliness in terms of detergency, which has been proven out by other tests. But it also has the lubricity that's required and called for by the OEM manufacturers here in the US, Europe, and even Bosch. It meets that 400 wear scar minimum. It also has the highest cetane. And you didn't have to do anything. Now, just riding around town here, I've been paying attention the last few days. The price for Exxon or Mobil diesel isn't really different than the diesel at other gas stations that aren't the premium diesel. Now, Exxon and Mobil are not sponsoring this video. I make these videos for you, the viewer, to give you good information so that you can make educated decisions. And what I see from all of this data are a few key points. Number one, fuel cleanliness is critically important. Therefore, if you don't have to add something to your fuel where you could be introducing extra contaminants, that's probably a good thing. But you need to make sure that you have good lubricity. We know that the regular fuel doesn't have detergents and it does have the minimum in terms of lubricity, and that is a concern for engines that have the high pressure common rail, high pressure fuel pumps. And we also know that higher cetane helps the engines be more efficient and make better fuel economy. Something we all like. All of this data from these tests kind of point towards using the premium diesel over using just a regular diesel plus an additive. And that's what's changed my mind. I don't know if other brands have premium diesel. It would be cool if they do. We might go do some exploring and see if we can find something like that. It'd be also interesting to see what effect biodiesel has on this. I know biodiesel tends to reduce the wear scar. It has high lubricity, but it can be problematic for deposits, right? So that could be an issue. So we just don't know what we don't know yet. So here's the bottom line. Premium diesel fuel provides all the advantages of a regular diesel fuel plus an additive without any of the downsides, extra costs, or stink. If you know, you know. Hope you enjoyed the video. Thanks for watching.